how much weight am I saving if I do this? And you're kind of guessing. We actually made a chart. So we would take a number 4 sporter, pop it on the scale, record it down, the caliber, the length, and everything. And we had this chart. And then we'd flute it, get it all done, pop it back on the scale. So this would be a number 4 sporter right here. It's a 7 millimeter. You're only saving 4 ounces.
What is up, everybody? Full house today. We have Mark on the mic. That's me. Jim to my right. Yeah, Jim, I'm introducing you.
Thanks,
formally. Yeah. Mr. Ryan Muckenhern across from us. And also, very special guest in studio, Mr. Matt Pederson from Pederson Precision. Fairly local to us here in Barneveld. Topic of today's conversation, barrel fluting. Doesn't mean you're a barrel flautist, I don't think.
Flautist or flautist?
Flautist.
Okay.
Flautist, yeah. I said that wrong.
It's fine.
I'm not a big flute guy.
A lot of people are going to be Googling flautist.
Not the, is that a thing? That's not something different, is it?
Flautist? No, that's somebody who plays flute.
Yeah, I think you were right.
I think if you played a piccolo.
Remember, a philatelist or a philatelist
that's
was
the
a stamp collector.
Yeah. A lot of philatling going on right now.
An atlatl is
not enough on your part.
Ryan, you and I did a special hunt where atlatl was a listed method of take.
Yep.
Yeah. We haven't done it yet.
We used firearms.
We haven't figured out how to put an optic on one of those things. Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
We did a lot of precasting where it was, a lot of nonsensical gibberish. I thought we had it out of our system, Jim.
We should ask the listeners.
And then we went right back into that dark hole.
King of the Hill or Family Guy?
Oh, that was one of our earlier questions.
Drop a comment.
Better kids show, as I call it. Better cartoon, Ryan. Family Guy or King of the Hill. Yeah. Boy, you were had a lot of
thought put into that.
Yeah, you're pretty passionate, Ryan.
Yep. It's like you and music.
Don't listen to a lot of music.
And we're back.
Anyway.
Matt, thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
It's awesome having you here. If you can, give us a little rundown about what you have going on in Argyle, Wisconsin.
Okay. I'm a full-time gunsmith, riflesmith as I like to call it. I kind of specialize in the high-end, lightweight hunting rifle, long-range hunting rifles, tactical match guns, kind of stuff like that. Been doing it full-time for 4 years, but I've been doing it, had my hand in it for 12 years, I think it is now. So it's just something I'm passionate about, something I've always, since a little kid, I remember looking through the magazines and, Remington, Winchester, whatever, and just being infatuated with rifles. So it just kind of came full circle. Crazy story how I got here, but I'm here. So this is what I do.
You're kind of a big deal in that area.
Maybe. I'm kind of a humble guy, so. But yeah, I'm busy. I can't complain. It's when I first made the big jump at the full time. Like, God, can I do this? My wife and I had this conversation. I'm like, I'm gonna give it a whirl, and holy cow, it didn't take long. It's really taken off. So
I know.
Very cool.
Ryan came into the shop. Mm-hmm. You know what, Ryan? I like how oftentimes, and I think only you and I do it that I'm aware of, but we still call Vortex the shop.
Yeah.
Like when I talk about Outdoor Emporium, like that was the shop, and now this is the shop. You came in.
Was Cabela's the shop?
No.
Really?
I really loved it there. It was a great place, but it wasn't.
Wasn't the shop?
Yeah, it wasn't the shop. You're like, I met somebody.
I did.
And I was like, and then you started talking about you, Matt.
Okay.
And I got very jealous because I felt like Ryan had a new best friend. You were quite impressed, Ryan.
I was. I'm a skeptic of everything all the time, constantly. Jim calls it my crippling indecision, which it's two different categories.
Well,
and so I've been doing guns professionally now for 2 decades. Started at a gun shop, went to a manufacturer. I'm here at Vortex. And you meet a lot of people and you see a lot of things and you get exposed to a lot of products and a lot of practices. And then you meet somebody who's just like tells it like it is, knows what's going on and the why behind something. It's not a practice that's thrown together willy-nilly. We didn't pull a print off of Wikipedia and start hammering things out on a lathe or a mill. Different than print out from Wikipedia.
There's a lot of good information. This printout here is a Mark Boardman original.
Anyone can add to it. That's
Those
how you know
are
it's
my
trustworthy.
words. Yeah.
And when I met Matt, I thought, this guy is a nice guy that knows what he's doing. And that's this very short summary. I expounded to Mark for...
My parents would be proud.
Well, there you go. And immediately I thought, you know what it was? You built a shop to do what you do. This is not out of the proverbial basement. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I know guys that got nice setups in their basement, but you put a shop together. It's laid out intelligently for flow of work and economy of motion, and you have everything just set up the way you need it to be set up to be successful. And it's obvious. It shows. I've talked to a lot of your customers. I've shot a lot of the guns that you've built for your customers. They come in here and get fit. And, of course, you and I have worked together on some small stuff. And sold. I'm in. Both feet.
Not to just keep showering you with compliments, Matt, but I will. When we were down in the showroom there, this is my first time meeting Matt, but I got some glimmers of that, just talking about different rifles and cartridges, and you tweak this and it turns it into that, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. But it's also not something that's necessarily happening right now.
Not yet.
So Matt, you're like, I felt like you gave me a glimpse into the future.
Yeah, it's being in this field, it's crazy. Like, you can see trends before they happen. Like, I'm seeing stuff, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a thing in 2 years commercially.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been doing, when I say we've, like a couple barrel shops that I've worked with in the past, and myself, like, we're doing this now. Like, this is happening. You wait 2 years, it'll be in every magazine there is. So it's crazy.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about barrel fluting?
Ooh, yeah.
Let's just start. Matt, what is barrel fluting, and why might a person either select a rifle that maybe comes with that, or get some custom work done on their barrel to change the form factor there?
Okay. Well, I can just shower a bunch of information at you, and you can just kind of ask me questions about the way. I'm going to be honest, most of my customers want flutes because it looks cool. Honestly. Okay. I mean, it does. But there is reasons behind it. But I mean, obviously this is sexy. I mean, the spiral fluting stuff is just amazing. From a rifle builder standpoint, basically it allows you to run a little bit stiffer barrel without the weight. That's my definition behind barrel fluting. So I brought this in today. This is like the go-to. I've built more of these as far as fluted barrels than any other. It's the number 4 Sporter Fluted. Okay, so you ask, why is this so popular? Basically what it does is it gives you like the weight or the balance of a factory Remington 700 Winchester Model 70, sure. It gives you the weight and the feel of that, but increased stiffness because the barrel's larger in diameter. And on top of that, I mean, it looks cool, but it's just, you get a more accurate barrel without the weight, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
So, yep. And then in other fields, like a varmint gun, a substantially heavier barrel, you're going to flute that. It's going to have deep flutes. It does help with cooling off. It'll speed up cooling. Now it heats up faster too.
Okay, that was my question too. Do you get that on both sides of the coin?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword if you want to call it that. But yeah, so it'll heat up faster, but because of the increased surface area, it cools off faster. So you're sitting at a prairie dog town, it heats up, you just it'll dissipate that heat, and you can really, if you're shooting, you can see the mirage coming off of it. I mean, it cools it down. I got a quick story. This is my first introduction to fluting. I didn't know anything about rifles at the time. I had with a Weatherby Varmint Master, awesome gun. We went to Miles City, Montana, and I was green at this. I'm just slaying prairie dogs left and right. And I found this hot spot where they had no idea. Everybody knows when you get to the prairie dog town where they don't have a clue. And all of a sudden I stop. I start missing. Over top, left, right. I'm like, what is going on? And I look at my barrel and I can see the mirage. And I'm like, oh no. I took a bottle of water, take a rag, and I wipe my barrel, and a droplet of water, I kid you not, goes down the flute and disappears by the time it gets right there.
Sure.
and I baked my barrel.
Did you really?
It was done. After
Yeah.
that, it never shot the same.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, oh, okay. So that was before I knew any of this stuff. I was young. So, but yeah, I mean, it definitely helps with cooling. But like I said, it heats up faster. But the rigidity is nice. So, I mean, that's what I got. If you got questions, I can help.
Yeah. I mean, I think to summarize that, you gain a mechanical advantage from like the mechanical component of accuracy in that you're running a barrel with a larger contour. You're reducing the weight by removing that material. And is it, in your opinion, a significant amount of weight? I mean, I suppose it depends on the flute depth and the flute width.
It really depends on the cutter. So, I mean, this is the one that's brought with. It's a relatively narrow cutter. You can see these different, wider and different widths. Yeah. I actually brought notes. So
I like it.
Wow.
Yeah, you like this? So
Handwritten.
Like I said, I used to work at two barrel manufacturers, and the whole time we'd get the calls like, how much weight am I saving if I do this? And you're kind of guessing. We actually made a chart. So we would take a number 4 sporter, pop it on the scale, record it down, the caliber, the length, and everything. And we had this chart. And then we'd flute it, get it all done, pop it back on the scale. So it's not as much as I thought, honest to God. So this would be a number 4 sporter right here. It's a 7 millimeter. You're only saving 4 ounces.
Well,
I don't know if that surprises
It depends
you.
on who you're talking to. 4 ounces can be a lot or a little.
to me, when I look at that, like I guess I wouldn't have guessed a quarter pound out of that.
Yeah.
Because it is a narrow flute. It's not super wide. It's
Right.
not like the Tika that's next to it, or certainly not like the Seekins.
Right.
And they're not super deep. And I'm sitting there trying to think about, okay, how many chips are coming out of that flute? I could hold those chips in my hand. What would those chips weigh? Remember, it is steel. Steel is fairly heavy. 4 ounces, though, is not insignificant. I mean, as you're putting together a rifle and you're looking at like sum of all parts and what they weigh.
Stocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. You pay a lot more money to drop 4 ounces in a stock than you would in a barrel.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's out of a good location on the gun to lose a little bit of weight, especially if you're using what a lot of people are doing with these carbon stocks and, composite stocks and things like that. They're getting really lightweight towards the butt end of the rifle.
That's
And then
exactly
the barrels
right.
that they're looking for are hyper accurate barrels, usually larger contours. And so they have all this weight out forward, which I know I don't really like. I like it when everything is, and I think most people like it when everything's as even as possible. So if you can get some of that big cantilevered forward weight, if you can reduce it, that's a big deal.
So
And 4 ounces feels like a lot when it's, a lot
Sure,
more than
right.
4 ounces when it's, got a lever arm of being
Yeah.
hung out 24 inches in front of you or 20 inch, or, whatever it is.
So you reap the benefit of the larger contour barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get into the weight class of like a number 3?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So-
basically, you go down a barrel size by fluting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why this is like
In
the
weight.
goat. You guys remember back in like the late '90s? It's kind of before my time. But the Beanfield rifles,
Oh,
you
yeah.
remember? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember as a kid looking at them, oh, these are amazing. This is before like, your turrets and all that stuff. And you needed flat shooting rifles. They're called Beanfield rifles. They're all like 6.5, 284 and 264 Win mags. And I remember looking at those. I'm like, God, those are sexy. And what they were is they were number 4 and 5 sporters, always fluted. Yep. And I remember looking at them like, those are amazing. But that's basically where they were hunting rifles with not quite target barrels on them, fluted to feel like a hunting gun.
Sure.
So,
Mhm.
yep.
Mhm.
And you can run conventional stocks, not like a big wide form, and they look like it's a custom rifle. And that's where they came from.
Now, sometimes I've noticed on these flutes, pardon me, Mark.
No, it's fine, Jim. Go ahead.
No, I get it. No, it's happened to me.
Please go ahead.
Sometimes I've noticed on these flutes that in the case of this barrel here that we're pointing out that's not on a firearm right now, the flutes start, a little bit forward of the shank, and then they go down, I don't know, not all the way to the end of the barrel. I think that this one here in the middle, what am I looking at here?
Tika.
This one here in the middle, the flutes start about the same point, and they seem to go closer to the end of the barrel. Now, how is that determined?
Yeah, I knew this was coming. So this is a blank that has to be cut off yet. So this will.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So this is fluted for 24 inches. Okay. Usually what we do is you go to the end of the flutes, add 2 inches.
Okay.
A little weight at the muzzle is a good thing. Think of like a harmonic balancer, a little weight at front. It's like a tuner. So, I mean, here's your sequence. It's pretty much 2 inches if you look at it. This is awful close also. It looks good too. There are a couple commercial manufacturers out there that for some reason stop really short, and I think that looks really goofy. As far as this end right here, it really doesn't matter. I just go off of my looks. Like I don't even measure anything.
Oh, okay.
Usually I try to start like right where the main taper kind of settles down, and that's where I put it.
Sweet.
So,
Yeah.
yep. But it does make sense at the end. Yep.
Okay.
2 inches roughly.
When you remove some of that material via the fluting process, does the barrel lose some of its rigidity?
Yeah, anytime you remove any material, you're losing stiffness per se.
Okay.
Just like why you shoot a heavy barrel versus a number 2 sporter, the more material you have there, the stiffer the barrel.
Okay.
But I mean, if you're thinking like a term of like stiffness, like if you had 2 pipes and one was larger diameter and a thinner wall thickness and a smaller diameter, a thicker wall thickness, you say the same weight, the bigger diameter is always going to be stiffer, so you get a little bit more rigidity with a larger diameter barrel, even though material's taken out.
Gotcha.
And so that asks or brings up another question. A thing that I had always heard is that if you took barrel of X contour and fluted it, it actually added rigidity because of the structure. The reality, as you mentioned, is you have a same weight barrel as that contour class lower with added stiffness, but it's not even Steven, and we're probably not adding.
So some people are thinking basically what you're getting, like an angle iron effect going on
Yeah.
when you cut those in, and so
I've actually reached out I have some engineering friends, and I used to teach like AutoCAD and SolidWorks, and there was programs where you could draw this, extrude this out, and then put a load on it and detect that. I don't have access to that software anymore. But I have a hard time believing it. I can't give it a definitive answer like, oh, no, that can't be right. But all I know is larger diameter, it's going to be stiffer.
Yep.
And you're just taking out material to make it lighter, I guess. You drop a barrel class, like you said, I think is what you're doing.
And you're still, maybe you're not to what the number 4 is going to give you unfluted, but you're certainly better than what the 3 would be just on diameter alone.
Yep.
Right.
For sure,
Right.
for sure.
How important is like, maybe I don't have a great way to put this, but like precision tooling, right? I mean, I would imagine when you're removing this material, you have to do it very evenly, very uniformly, no matter what the style. Yes, or?
Yeah, it's not as important as you might think. Like I personally fluted this one as a horizontal mill. It's like an old school horizontal cutter, and it drips oil on it, and you're just hogging material. Well, yes, you want to use a sharp tool. You don't want to induce stress into the material by using a dull cutter and pressing on it and putting all these forces onto it. I know this was done CNC. They have like a rotary, and it goes down with maybe like it looks like they use the same cutter I kind of do, but some of them use like ball end mills. You'll see like this one right here has the rounded bottom. Could have been that. I don't know how they do it, but it's nowhere near as fancy as you might think it might be.
Interesting.
It really isn't. It's pretty simple.
Is there any risk like at the barrels, I guess, stage in process? So we would start with, what's a nominal barrel diameter before contouring?
Inch 250.
Inch 250. Of course, you're going to contour first. Well, let's back up a little bit. Even before it has a bore, all rifle barrels are going to be deep core drilled and rifled before they're contoured. No?
Yeah, I mean, so first step, you're going to drill a hole,
Yep.
just remove material.
Yep.
Then you're going to ream it.
Okay.
A reamer just basically takes 3/1000ths and it makes that hole concentric.
Sure.
And then it's drilled and reamed. And then depending on how fancy of a barrel it is, it can get lapped and whatnot from there, and button rifled, cut rifled, whatever you want to do from there. But I know what you're getting at is you're asking me, can you induce stress or harm a barrel by fluting it?
At a particular point in the process.
And I have an awesome story for you guys. So when I used to work when I first started at the barrel shop, I was green, like I didn't know anything, and I lapped barrels all day. So lapping barrels, You basically cast a lap with molten lead on a clean rod, you pull it through, and you're basically, everybody thinks you're going for surface finish, but you're really making sure those sides are basically parallel. You're taking out any machining harmonics and stuff like that. So I used to just lap barrels all day when I first started. We had a customer come in with this big bull barrel AR-10 barrel. I mean, it was huge. It was probably pushing 900 thousandths at the muzzle. 24 inches, 308. He's like, I really like this gun. It shoots pretty good, but it's so heavy. And I'm like, yeah, I can imagine why. So he goes, can you guys flute this? And this wasn't me. I was just a bystander at the time. It's like, oh, yeah, we'll give it a try. So they flute it. And then after fluting, it's like, oh, we should probably final lap this thing. And he starts to lap, and he's like, oh, my. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I can feel the flutes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh.
So think of an AR-10. You have, obviously, at the muzzle, you have 2 inches of unfluted. But then in the middle, you have an unfluted spot for a gas block.
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously, you have about 4 inches here of, the taper and the barrel extension, whatever. But, yeah, so what happened on cheap steel is after fluting, it opened up dimensionally.
Sure.
So as you lap it, you would literally feel tight, loose where the flutes are, and then tighten.
Sure.
And you would feel that.
Ooh.
And I don't know what happened to the barrel, but there's no way it could shoot like that.
Sure.
It was probably junk. So I don't know the conclusion of the story, but that's cheap steel.
Even more than process, then, it's the material that the barrel's made of. It's heat treat at some point.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
okay.
So in an ideal world, drilled, reamed, contoured, rifled, fluted, final lap.
Okay, so contouring occurs before.
It
rifling.
should,
Okay.
but not many people do it because, one, it makes all the barrels different shapes to
Sure.
fit in their machine. And two, if somehow during the rifling process something gets goofed up out of spec, you just wasted contour time
Sure.
and it gets junked. For the most part, all your custom rifle barrels are using really good steel. We always said the best custom rifle barrel manufacturer is the one who has the best steel.
Sure.
So 416R stainless steel is what's going to be used. It's heat treated prior of even showing up at the facility,
Sure.
and it shouldn't move.
Sure.
It shouldn't change after contour. Now, keep that in mind. The last thing that should be done is final lapping.
Yep.
Because that kind of smooths all that out. Yep.
Several different styles of fluting out there. We've got a couple on the table, like, straight or spiral or
classical flute.
Yeah.
And jazz flute.
Classic flute.
And jazz flute.
Man, I've seen some honeycomb
Skip flutes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There are some of those.
So maybe let's talk through some of the different styles, but then either my main question or follow-up question is, do different styles remove more weight? Like, I look at the spiral, I'm like, well, certainly that must have removed more material from just the way that it's done, but maybe not.
Yeah, it would. Simply it's wider. So look, I call these the splines. The splines are really narrow. The fluting's wider, and it's pretty deep. This would, by far, if I looked at these three, this is easily removing the most material. This one, if it was fluted a little bit further, would probably be a second. This one's probably like a third. But it's basically what makes it lighter is you're moving the most material. So wider and deeper.
Yep.
It's the only thing that really controls it. The skip fluting, it's not as light. That's more for aesthetics because you're literally leaving a rib between each skip. So you're not losing much weight there. It's more so aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't they even sometimes do a fluting that actually, like a spiral fluting, jazz flute, that actually tightens up its spiral even as the barrel goes along?
Gain, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is that more aesthetic or
it's CNC controlled, so they'll speed up the rotation as it flutes. But,
sure.
Is that like geometrically, like if you have like essentially a tighter spiral of flutes, is that removing more material per inch of the barrel where it tightens up than further back?
I would think so, but I can't confirm or deny.
Okay.
I'd also be curious. Like you had mentioned using like CAD or SolidWorks or a similar program where you could model this extrusion and then test it under load or torsion or torque. I'd love to know if and how we would ever figure this out. I'm too ignorant, but if we spiral fluted a barrel one direction and then we spiral fluted it opposing the rifling.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Do we see some sort of change in the behavior of the barrel under the load of that bullet ripping down the bore?
I would say no. I remember when I used to work at the barrel shop, the guy was a metallurgical engineer. Yeah. That's who I learned off. And they cut left-hand twist, right-hand twist. They kind of talked about that, but like, how do you test that?
Sure.
And let's be honest, the mass of a bullet is very little. There can't be a lot of torque. You'd have to get like I'm just throwing stuff out here, a really heavy bullet with a really tight twist to see if that would make any difference.
Sure.
And these are all fluted. I mean, there's a formula for your depth to leave the wall thickness, and there's a substantial amount of material there. I just can't see that flexing that much.
Really? Okay.
I can't.
And that's a misconception that then I've always had in the back of my head, right, wrong, or otherwise, that like, I think it looks, I'm not, I guess personally, a spiral flute for me is not as aesthetically pleasing as a straight flute. But I always saw it in my head like, oh gosh, what happens when we do that spiral flute? Does that barrel, does it twist more? Does it twist less?
That question's been asked by many, and I don't think a true answer's ever been.
Well,
south of the equator, all the gunsmiths.
Yeah, it's got to go the other direction.
No different direction. The other.
It certainly speeds up the bullet. I about guarantee.
Probably,
that.
It's like when you add a TRD component to your Toyota, you +5. Yeah. For sure. I don't have my stickers installed yet, but I'm looking forward to my games. That's really interesting. Well, that's good because I've been afraid to ask that question for sounding silly, but I just shot it out anyway. So,
do you find when you were talking about somebody bringing in a barrel, cheap steel, asking to flute it, and then actually that causing a problem? Do you ever find where people will come into you and they're like, "Hey, I've got this big old honking barrel. I'd love to get it fluted," and it's kind of like, well, let's talk about that actually. Like I would recommend not doing this.
I've had this conversation, I guarantee 20 times.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just never a good thing to flute something that's already been chambered, crowned, and ready to go. Stuff can change dimensionally on the inside. One, you're going to ruin your crown because of, the live center you put into it or whatever. So it has to be recrowned. It's just, I've done it before, but I don't like doing it.
Sure.
I can't guarantee what's going to happen after I do it. I could do the best job in the world, and then you go to shoot, and it shoots 6-inch groups at 100.
Yeah.
So
a post-production, like post-hanging that barrel, chambering onto that gun, like a factory rifle, unless it had a really long barrel that you could, stand to cut off 3 inches from the, I don't know how long your live is on that, but you could cut it off and maybe it would be okay, but you'd otherwise prefer that shooter starts off with a fresh barrel.
Yeah. I mean, you have all that money tied up and stuff. Why would you want to do something that'll
potentially
adversely affect your...
Right.
Yeah, it's just not worth it in all honesty.
Yeah.
That's good to know, though.
Yeah.
Because, I could see a lot of folks out there being like, oh, man, I got this. But
yeah. Guys do it. I've seen it. You can send stuff out. But, coming from the barrel field that I know what happens to the steel when you do it.
Sure.
And then the cheaper steels, factory guns, I hate to say it, but they do not react the same as a custom barrel steel.
Sure.
Okay.
So
that is very good to know.
We talked a little bit earlier about, the depth of the flutes. How deep can you go?
Basically, you want 125 thousandths wall thickness minimum from your groove in your rifling to the bottom of your flute. That's minimum. So this one, there's a formula, you can calculate it all out. This one's not fluted super deep. I basically picked these numbers to make it look like this. I personally like it when the splines, as I call them, is wider than the flute. Some people don't. You can see here, this flute's wider than the spline. Mm-hmm. It's just personal preference, but you'll get some customers like, I want minimal weight. Take as much as you can, and that's what we do.
Sure.
Do you remember when there was a big trend, maybe it's still going on, I don't know, I stopped paying attention, but a big trend in skeletonizing everything on your AR? I was just waiting for somebody to do skeletonized flutes.
Sure. Well, so...
Just no wall thickness.
Yeah.
It's just...
So there's some interesting
line
stuff, like Chad Dixon out at LRI did that really wild geometric flute.
The honeycomb?
It's like that. It's a multifaceted shape that's milled into the barrel.
Yeah, yep.
And you end up, I would describe them more so almost as like parallelograms.
Okay.
That also spiral around the barrel.
It almost looked like the netting that comes over your brand new barrel, but it was just like
cut
into the barrel, if I'm recalling.
It is like, that is the most machine work. It's similar to that.
Yeah,
So
that's the one I was referring to. I've seen that hands-on. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of material.
Yeah, and sometimes people would do like the dimples.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like Crane, responsible for building a lot of the SF guns from project conception to completion, had done some ball end mill, just like straight dives into the barrel and removed a ton of material under the handguard of like an M4 or similar platform. And it looks a lot like that. That's almost like a 3-dimensional hexagon. But I'm certain, like, you're not doing anything like that, right? You're doing just straight fluting or spiral fluting.
Yep.
How long, if you took that number 4 blank and you set it up,
somebody's pretty excited next door.
Yeah. If you took that number 4 blank, set it up, and began the fluting process, from a time perspective, is that days, weeks, months, hours?
It's actual, just the fluted?
Yeah.
Oh, 30 minutes.
Okay. So that's always something I had been told was like this very slow, arduous process where, that you're dang near running that grinder by hand, right? And monitoring the temperature and all that stuff. So it's like any other standard machining process. We're taking material off, and as long as it's done safe, good cutting tools, good indication.
Feeds and speeds are important, and lots and lots of cutting fluid to reduce inducing stress into the barrel.
Sure.
But yeah, once you have it set up, I mean, the biggest thing, like on sporters, like I have to leave the muzzle 15 thousandths lower than this, so the flute actually gets shallower as it goes.
Sure.
That's personal preference. But yeah, once you ever set up, you just let her eat, and you can walk away, and it'll self-stop, come back, check on it, rotary indexer. And I mean, these have all 6 flutes. There's 8 flutes, 3 flutes, 12 flutes I've even seen on huge barrels.
Yep.
It's just preference.
Sure. How did you land on, just out of curiosity, the decrease in depth as you go to the muzzle?
I just kind of like it on heavy tapers like this. I think it looks a little cleaner. Like I try to keep these splines about the same width. You see that?
Yep.
Oh, going all the way down. Yeah.
So if you don't do that, the splines will get narrower and narrower and narrower, and it just, to me, doesn't look good. Like I said, I'm pretty picky on my stuff, so it's just the way I do it. And
that's another reason why I like Matt a lot, is because he's also an artist when it comes to this kind of thing. Like
he's thought about it.
Yeah, and we had. I think the first night that I was out at your shop, I think we were out there for 6 hours.
Oh, it was a long time.
Yeah, just
my wife came and checked on me. Like, you all right out here? And I came back in. It's like, what's going on?
But Ryan told me about that conversation. I'm like, I'm not really sure who's holding who hostage.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I'm like intimately fascinated by what your eye sees and why you see it that way. And part of it, of course, comes from your background being a barrel maker, which is no small accolade and no small title. But then also, like, you're a craftsman, and you build a product that looks good to you, that you put your name on. And so there's a lot of cognition that goes into that. It wasn't just a guess. It wasn't just a dart at the wall. And
yeah, everything's thought out ahead of time, and there's a reason and why. Yep. I mean, I love building rifles. I like putting my own flares on them. I love when customers come to me, you have artistic freedom, do what you want. I'm like, I'm gonna Cerakote this, and we're gonna run zombie green flutes. And it's like, oh yeah, go for it. I'm like, oh, this makes my day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wild. Any fluting style or we'll call it style, that you just flat out don't like to recommend, or for risk, or for complexity, or for any other reason?
Not really. I really like Seekins does an awesome job with their spiral flute, and I really like this, and I also really like this. There is another one I think they call the Diamond, where they basically run a spiral and they run it both ways, right and left turn.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah,
you can reduce a lot of weight doing that. Some people think it looks too busy. I personally like it. The only fluting I can't stand, and I disagree with it. Have you seen where they fluted carbon barrels?
No.
Oh, post-wrap.
Post-wrap.
Yeah.
Oh.
You don't care for it.
Defeats the total purpose of carbon wrapping a barrel.
Sure.
Like I tell people, like, okay, on your house, take your roof decking or your sheeting, and let's just, on your 4x8 sheet of plywood, let's just run a bunch of kerfs with a skill saw.
Well, sure.
Through the plywood. You're cutting through those layers.
Yeah.
It's like you're totally defeating the purpose of building those layers up in all those different directions.
Yeah.
And
it
also,
makes no sense.
The carbon wrap was used with what's inside of that is obviously you don't have a carbon fluted inside, like a carbon surface is not actually being used as the surface of the bullet is running down. There is a small steel sleeve within that.
There's a core.
And you wrapped it in carbon to lighten.
Yes.
I mean, like, yeah, you basically, it's almost used in lieu of fluting an all steel barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
but they are. I've seen, and everybody asks them, "Oh, can you flute carbon?" I'm like, you can, but you're defeating the purpose of all those layers. And are you really saving weight? You're taking out carbon.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's strictly for aesthetics. Some people just love it and think it's cool. I can't stand it.
Sure.
You're taking those layers that are made to make that barrel stiffer, and you're cutting through them.
No.
Yeah.
I think I stand with Matt.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I did ask him though if we could carbon wrap a fluted barrel, what that would look like, and then the answer was no.
I mean, you could, but you
probably
would never
wouldn't. Yeah, you wouldn't end up with a dramatic.
And the cores are already about as small as you can go.
Sure.
So,
I guess so. I've never seen this or heard of this being a problem, but it popped into my head when you have, any of these styles of fluting. Does a person at all have to be mindful of trapping debris or moisture, perhaps, or more mindful because there's potential for, like, when you laid your rifle down and you kind of collect some dirt in those scalloped areas?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you get dirt in there.
Maybe like underneath something. I've seen rifles before where stuff has fallen down underneath the barrel action between the stock and stuff, but I don't think it's a big worry.
Sure.
Okay. Ryan, you collected it looked like one of those seed packs that you could buy at the store when you took apart my shotgun.
Oh yeah, Mark had brought me a Benelli M2 and he says this thing doesn't work. And he says, I should have bought a Beretta or something.
Oh, I never said that. I love the Benelli.
I took it apart.
Right there with you.
I took it apart and there was enough. I mean, you could have made like a diorama with a gingerbread house and it would have looked like some sort of outdoor landscape with the amount of material. There was, I think, even some extinct wildflowers that had been contained within Mark's Benelli.
We could have.
He holds the key.
We could have reseeded some sort of natural
with
grassland.
a lot of material.
Conservationists of the year.
It was substantial enough that when Ryan gave me my shotgun back, he also gave me the bag of seeds.
You might want this.
There's a very
on to this.
big smattering of debris in there. I mean, there's deciduous leaf matter. There was like prairie grass. There was also some pine duff. So I could tell that Mark had been a few different places with this gun. It was interesting.
You could see see the growing zones that he had been through.
It was like taking a core sample. He'd be like, "Oh, this is when."
Oh, Pacific Northwest. How was your trip?
Do you do any bolt fluting?
I send that stuff out. That's all CNC. Again, looks cool. Strictly aesthetics. There's no gains, mechanical gains of what's the two reasons behind it. I mean, yes, you're losing a tiny bit of weight, but people, like all your custom actions that have this, people think it's just for looks and stuff, but it actually helps with your debris, gathering that debris and getting out of your bolt raceways and stuff, and it'll actually help them run smoother if it is dirty.
Sure. So
you would be surprised.
Okay, so
you open that up, you're like, oh, it's all right here. So there is a reasoning behind it. Yeah,
I've wondered on that before because part of me is like, well, is it a tight enough fit if you don't have a fluted bolt where that stuff just gets kind of like scraped off as the bolt moves forward? Whereas then if you have the flutes, it's actually getting like caught in that and like it's staying there. Or I don't know. I just.
It's like a little mini road grader, just scrapes all that off and stays in the flutes.
Is the fluted bolt smoother because there's less contact?
Surface area, it is. Yep. That's like this Tika, I bet you, is wicked smooth.
Oh, well, it's
because they're smooth anyway. I know you're a fan.
Yeah.
And then you just reduce surface area and drag is what it is.
So it's I think I read one time that on a bolt flute, one of the first ones that was done was the Accuracy International, the Arctic Warfare rifle. And that fluting was, of course, debris mitigation. But also, if your bolt had frozen shut by having all that geometry in there. As you put upward like force on the bolt, it would shatter the ice that was holding it. And I think that was like the 8-year-old version of me reading some book on sniper rifles of the world or something like that. But it's really interesting. Not going to be the weight savings you appreciate with a barrel. And to me, like when you had mentioned it was a quarter pound that comes off a number 4, even with those flutes, and they're pretty scant. I mean, they're not.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to hear that.
Yeah, they're not super wide flutes.
Yeah, I have more numbers if you want to go through.
Oh, please.
So, like your number 3 sporter, which is very, very comparable to your factory Winchester Model 70 Remington 7, 2 ounces is all you're saving.
Sure.
The number 4 sporter, like you see here, 4 ounces. Number 5 sporter, 6 ounces. You see a pattern here.
Yeah.
2 ounces per every size. And then if you go up to your, like a Remington Sendero, your heavy barrel varmint barrel, half a pound, 8 ounces. And then your M24, great big, 10 ounces.
Significant.
So that's significant.
Yeah, that is.
Because you're going deep. I mean, really deep. And
Yep.
that's where the weight saving comes from.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And these were averages taken up from all different calibers. And I mean, obviously on like a 22 cal, you can flute deeper on a number 3 than you could a 7 millimeter.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the wall thickness, remember, 125.
Yeah, you got to look at it from the outside and the inside.
Yep. So you can save more from a smaller caliber because you can go deeper
Sure.
with flutes.
So I got a question.
That's why you should shoot, big bore rifles though, because they're
lighter.
It's pre-fluted from the inside.
Yeah, and so you're missing that material, so it's almost a wash, really, if you think about it.
It's
true.
Mark, are you a gunsmith?
You pay for it on the other end, but
No.
It's a full concentric fluting effect, so much so that there's you can't even distinguish the flutes. So I think this question needs to be asked. Why we've talked about this before, I'll just float it out there for people who
you're gonna flute it out there, Jim.
I'll flute it out there. So like, why is a stiff barrel so important? Because I've seen guns with skinny little barrels that shoot phenomenally. And I've seen guns with big old fat stiff barrels that shoot pretty bad. I've also seen guns with big old fat barrels that are really stiff that shoot really well, and I've seen guns with tiny little barrels that shoot terrible. So it's kind of like I haven't exactly seen a 1-to-1 ratio of stiffer barrel, therefore everything is always better. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know.
What is the advantage of a stiffer barrel?
Yeah.
Harmonics.
Yeah.
So there's a couple, if you go on YouTube or whatever, search like super slow-mo video of a gun being shot and like it's a wet spaghetti noodle. It's crazy how much that thing harmonics. So I mean, short barrels are stiff too. Everybody's like, I get customers that call me like, I want longer barrel for accuracy. I'm like, well, shorter barrels are stiffer. You don't get that effect. So stiffer barrels are more accurate. If you had 2 barrels of the same manufacturer and one was a number 3 Sporter and one was a Remington Sendero, I'd put money on the Sendero all day long.
Sure.
Now, when you're talking accuracy, are you talking 100-yard accuracy or are we talking 800-yard accuracy? That's when, you might not see the difference at 100 yards, let's be honest. But it's all harmonics, and harmonics can do with, different ammos are affecting harmonics. That's why some guys hand load, is to tune those harmonics. This is what you're doing. Stiffer is just takes away that harmonic. And then I know lighter barrels, he will heat up faster, and some guys you talk, once I get my 4th and 5th shot, it starts walking. That's heat, and then what happened is the stress left in that barrel is starting to show its ugly head.
Yeah.
So a heavier, stiffer barrel will camouflage some problems with steel.
Sure.
So that's really what that's. But stiffer is always better in the barrel world.
So
got it.
An interesting thing for those who listen to this podcast regularly. A
couple people.
Yeah.
We've determined at least a handful to a smattering.
I have that little 16-inch Tikka, and I shot it not a ton, but a fair bit. I usually see Tikkas start to settle down after like 20 to 25 rounds, and then I get pretty predictable performance out of them. And then they'll speed up and step as they always do. And so I had taken the gun that Matt had cut and threaded to 16 or 16-1, I think he gave me, and before and after, the gun actually shot better after. And that was after he was done with the wear. I just immediately went, I alcohol swabbed the bore out, and I went right back to the same loads that I had tested not 2 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior. And the gun behaved differently. It was good before, because most Tikkas are, but it was simply better after that. And you had mentioned if you remove length from that barrel, you're increasing its inherent rigidity
For sure.
alone.
For sure.
So as you had said, a long barrel, and this is a common just barrel misconception, and friends of mine in Europe have asked me this question before. It's like, why do you have such big guns? You know, and I would always thought, yeah, that longer barrel is going to assist in that long range accuracy. Shorten it up.
It just gets the bullet closer to the target before it actually has to leave.
Yes. Shortening it up, they become remarkably more rigid. And, you know, and you think about like, well, if anybody's ever handled PVC pipe before or any kind of plastic tubing of any kind of length,
6 foot section versus 12-foot section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Big
and
difference.
like you pick up that 6 foot section and it's like a rod. You pick up that 12 foot, it's got a distinct bow in it, right? Or give somebody a 2x4, they could probably, if it's long enough, using leverage, snap it pretty easily. Give them one that's 8 inches long and
No way.
watch them struggle for.
And your 308's the perfect example because Tikka contours anyway are light.
Yeah.
I mean, they're small. They're like number 2.5 sporters or something like this is what I would call them.
Yeah.
And then you got a big old 30 cal hole.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not dealing with a whole lot of material there anyway. And then that's a pretty prime example of what can happen. Now, I'm not saying everybody should go and chop the barrels right
Sure.
now, but I mean, there could have been some other factors. You know, the ammo might have been a little happier. It could have been my awesome target crown that I put on there for you.
Yeah. You know, my favorite part about that was, though, is he's like, you know, I can do this, but. And it wasn't just, yep, give it here, I'll shorten it up in 5/8 24 and Bob's your uncle. Again, you preface the risk right ahead of time, and I knew what would if it shot like crap, I was just going to get a different barrel and put it on there anyway.
Yeah, sure.
And that's, like I said, that's one thing where I've known a lot of people who have gone to a lot of places to get guns built, and they'll, yep, we'll get it taken care of. There's no explanation of the risks behind it, which just told me right then and there you have an understanding of the why behind a process and what comes along with it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that gun shoots like a house of fire, and I'm enamored with it. I cannot wait to get my lighter weight suppressor out of suppressor prison so that the gun is then complemented correctly, because right now it's got 19 ounces on the end of the muzzle. And yeah, so it'll have 7.5 here hopefully pretty
Which
soon.
can?
Mac Brothers Zenith.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So I'm very excited about that one.
It's going to be a really cool package.
Yeah. And like I said, just shoots famously, but shortening that barrel also makes it rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about carbon a little bit?
Yeah, we can. I just want to.
I don't
So
want
like all around, if you take a gun,
Yeah.
and you just make your barrel more rigid, boom, better.
Maybe.
Accuracy, I would say yes. You're never it's not gonna negatively affect it.
Yeah.
Stiffer's always better.
Okay.
Oh, hey, this is a good segment. We'll call this Ask a Gunsmith. You ever use a barrel deresonator?
Oh yeah, like a little rubber donut.
Oh, the limb saver little.
Yeah, one of these guys right here.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
I have
what do we
not.
call it? The doinger.
Oh,
I
you've
have
never
not.
done that?
I have never done that.
Ryan calls it the doinker.
My hunting partner calls it a doinker. I have adopted the term endearingly. Mark and I have a debate about this.
Tell me everything you think, and I'll give you my 2 cents. I guess.
Oh, this is perfect. So I had.
We still haven't done the testing. It's
I
on our
know.
list of. It's on our to-do list of follow-up
Our list
podcasts.
keeps growing, Mark.
I know.
I ordered, and you may have seen these before. They officially came out as what's called the Weatherby Backcountry Custom. It was a Vanguard to emulate the weight of a Mark V ultralight. I had it in 300 Weatherby. And as you can see, I have a problem with high recoiling lightweight rifles. Very temperamental gun until I installed a limb saver barrel deresonator.
Are you for sure? Really?
Oh, without, like, on my mother's life.
I would have never guessed that in a million years.
It went from poor to exceptional, and so predictably that you could take the deresonator off and the gun went poor. You put the deresonator on and the gun.
My brother provides a similar report.
Mark,
on one of his rifles.
you provide yourself a similar report.
No, here's Ryan put one on
We're back.
my gun.
We're back.
You know, this is a story. Ryan was helping me get I think I had a new load or whatever the heck I was doing. Now people are going to be tired of the story because they're possibly hearing it again. At the last minute, I said, hey, Ryan, can you get this sighted in? I probably had some kid stuff to deal with or whatever. He obliged. Also, he returns the rifle to me with the Deresonator on. And I say, you know what? Aesthetically, it's not my most favorite thing in the world.
Right there with you.
But I trust you. Later on down the road, I was shooting that rifle down at Edge. And I was like, it wasn't a horrible group, but it wasn't the best. And I'm like, well, let's see what happens when I take it off. And for me, the rifle shot better when I pulled it off. But also, I think that proves that it does change the harmonics of the barrel, good or bad.
Harmonics in the barrel world, I mean, harmonics are everything. Everybody's seen the tuners you put at the end.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically what you're doing is you're fine-tuning those vibrations. So it's the same, when that bullet leaves that muzzle, it's the same flex every time.
Yep.
You can do it by hand loading, by tuning powder charges and whatever. You've seen the tuner suppressors a lot of times help. You
Sure.
get the weight on in the front, it kind of just settles down harmonics. Even like the 22 rimfire world, like the competition, you wouldn't think a 22 rimfire with these big heavy barrels would have harmonics, but those guys all use tuners and they tune to their ammo.
Mm-hmm.
So they get certain lots of ammo, they'll buy pallets of it and they'll run out and they'll freak out. Oh, what am I going to do? They get a new lot and shoots a one hole. So harmonics are huge. It really is.
Are you doing any rimfire stuff yet?
Yeah, I did my couple Rim X's and it's a different world. It's different from what I know because I've always been a centerfire guy.
Sure.
And I've had the guy that makes the best rimfire barrels in the world kind of train me up on one. And this is the secret. This is what you do. And I did it. And the first group at 50 yards is a ragged hole.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And it's so easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
But it's like these little, I mean, that's how I got where I am. I literally surrounded myself with guys who were smarter than me.
Yeah.
And I soaked it in and I put my little flare on it and it's working.
Cool.
It's how you do it.
Very valid approach.
I might have a project for you here in the future.
Can we chat about carbon just a touch?
Just a little bit.
I'm excited.
I don't want to,
to,
you know what I mean?
Mark.
I don't want to overlap too much.
It's a whole nother podcast.
Well, maybe it should be. So one of the more interesting things that I had heard about you before I met you is that you do your own carbon wrapping. And here is a, we'll call it a field with a great deal of mystique around it in what goes into it, how it's done. Do you need alien technology to do it? You built your own setup.
I bought one and heavily modified it.
Sure.
Yes.
And that was one of the shorter stops on your shop tour because you basically gave me the summary in a nutshell, showed me a spool of carbon, showed me the machine, and be like, yep, it's pretty simple. You just kind of tie in and do it. It's messy. There's epoxy everywhere. You get a nice finish at the end of it when you're done with it. That's where that artistry comes in and the eye for detail. You talked a little bit about...
And then you flute it all out.
You talked a little bit about...
that's important. All the strength. Gone.
You talked a little bit about carbon blends that you can get. You can end up with some really interesting and beautiful patterns and even some different colors from a more metallic tone to a subdued black. Carbon barrels are obviously very popular.
Yeah. Extreme. I would say 85 to 90% of the rifles that leave my shop are carbon barrels.
Sure.
And I don't push them. I really don't. Like, I love this, but this is going away because of carbon. I flute very little barrels anymore.
Wow.
Everybody wants to go the carbon route, whether it looks cool. And there's a reason behind this technology. I mean, it's here to stay. Everybody's kind of second guessing it. And again, in my point of view, it adds stiffness.
Sure.
Carbon is stiff. And you get that itty bitty number 3-ish sporter with the stiffness of a Sendero without the weight.
Sure.
That's basically what you're getting. And I swear, we were talking about how to test this. I swear that carbon detons vibration and harmonics.
Sure.
Because the guns that I'm building have huge load windows. I mean, huge. Like, I've done ladder tests on my own guns where I have a, what was it, 4 grain powder discrepancy from my lowest load to my highest load. Shot a 7-shot group, 1 ragged hole.
Yeah.
4 grains of powder difference.
Yep.
And it's like these barrels just like take out vibrations, and I think we can't really prove it. We know we've proved it. I still want to do it. Gotta have time. but they shoot so well. It's like they shoot anything and everything.
Sure.
So
Sure. And that's
interesting.
That's been my experience with the limited sample size I have. It's just, you know, and I couldn't attribute it to, well, okay, is it the barrel steel? Is it the finishing process that goes into this? Like, I know the product that I bought is an uber premium component.
Blank. Yeah.
Yep. And like the folks that are doing it, they're putting the utmost of care into the bore finish, and like, this isn't just ramming a driller down there,
Right.
a haphazard rifling job, you know, a wet brush and patch down there and send it out the door. And so like my thought to myself was, is this thing just that really well finished? Is that chamber just that well manicured, or is it the totality of the system? So you as like as a craftsman and an artisan and a builder, like, you think fluting barrels is kind of a dying thing. It's going to be a vestigial trait left over.
I mean, it's still going to be around.
Sure.
I mean, it's went down probably 60-70% from what it used to be.
Sure.
Because everybody is carbon. Everything's carbon. Bike frames, car spoilers, everything. Backpacks.
Does seem to be the future.
Carbon to me is like the crow of materials.
You know how I am about crows.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Anyway, sorry.
But carbon, if you do it right, I mean, there's cheap carbon out there. There's expensive carbon. There's cheap epoxy. You got to do it right. You got to spend the best of materials when you're doing this kind of stuff. But as far as getting the gun just to shoot like it's supposed to, it's I would say the most important part is the barrel. You could do the best work on a terrible barrel. It won't shoot.
Sure.
It's my job to get the blanks in, knowing what I know about being in the barrel field and stuff like that. It's my job to put the chamber in there straight as possible, a nice, crisp, clean muzzle, and bed it properly, and the gun does the work. I can't take all the credit. It's barrel manufacturing and components. It's just my job to put it together like it's supposed to be put together.
When you carbon wrap a barrel, Mark, I know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to go too far into carbon wrapping, but I am curious real quick though. So
I'm actually more curious about your comparison to crows, because I'm like, you find carbon barrels to be oddly creepy with a weird spirit to them.
The material of carbon fiber, I think, is like the crow of materials.
That's what I mean, but I don't know what you mean by that.
It's dark, it's mysterious, it's seemingly very smart.
Okay.
It doesn't get cold.
Sounds like more of a raven to me than a crow.
A little more raven.
More ravenish, yeah.
Possibly.
Corvid in general.
I know, both
Corvid
corvids.
in general.
You know, blue jays are corvids too, though.
Yeah, well, they're...
You ever watch a blue jay? Think it was a pigeon? Anyway, do you start with a barrel blank and then you turn it down to have that channel for the carbon wrap to go in, or are they actually selling now barrels that are ready to be wrapped with the carbon wrap?
I have a connection with 2 barrel manufacturers that I used to work with. That's how I got into this. I wrap for those 2 companies. So I don't put my name on them. So we get inch 250 blanks, 27 inches long. They pre-contour them is what I like to call it, pre-contour, or I take them to another place depending on the company, and they contour it for me. I then wrap them.
Okay.
And then they go in a curing process in a programmable kiln. They get cured. Then I take them back to a barrel manufacturer who I still work closely with, and we use a CNC to turn them profile them down, and then spin sand them, and that's the final product you get.
Okay.
Yep. So I don't 100% run it out of my shop. I do all the wrapping at my shop and all the curing, but I'm still in collaboration with 2 other companies that I work close with.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious. I didn't know.
It's a process.
I've always wondered what the barrel looks like underneath the carbon, because I know that there's like a little core in there that the carbon is wrapped around, but I guess I've never seen that.
Everyone's different. Everybody has their theories behind it, and as far as tapers and diameters, and so we just kind of develop it. We've been doing this for a while, and they shoot so good. It's just like, why change anything?
Yeah.
I am running a different carbon now, which is less messy, because did you see the epoxy all over the place? Oh yeah, that's gone. I have pre-preg toe now. Oh my gosh, it's been a lifesaver.
Yeah. Your wall is, you can probably scrape off that.
Oh, it's terrible. I've never thrown so many fits at a certain individual or thing as that machine.
Yeah.
Because it was just, a strand would break and I'd have to dig down there. It was a disaster.
Oh.
But I have pre-preg toe that some of the best in the biz are using. I kind of heard through the grapevine, and that's what I use.
Sure.
So it's the best stuff out there.
So
that's really cool.
we'll get to a point like as people who want to build a custom rifle and let's just focus on lightweight hunting rifles, right?
Because that's kind of my gig. Yep.
Yeah.
It's what matters, really.
Like on one end of my spectrum, I have a Kimber Mountain Ascent. That's as light as they get. It's 4 pounds, 11 ounces naked. And then I've got a fully built up, it's a Tikka Action, but it's got a carbon barrel on it. It's got a carbon stock. I went with the lightest of materials for everything else that I can get away with, light optics, et cetera, et cetera. There's a delta between the weight of them. Like the Kimber is obscenely light. It's 6 pounds, 2.5 ounces, loaded scope with a sling. The Tikka is in the 7.25 to 7.5 range. Where do you make your recommendation, or where do you draw your line in the sand where like, no, you'll be better suited with like a light contour fluted barrel versus a carbon fiber barrel?
Yep. I just had this conversation with a friend the other day, and he's going on a sheep hunt, dull sheep hunt, right?
Sure.
And he's like, he's already have 2 carbon barrels from me that I've done, and he wants a light as he can go.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, do I build a new gun? Do I just use these and switch out a chassis stock, whatever? I'm like, those carbons are light, but they're not the lightest you can go. You can definitely go lighter with a fluted number. I would say like a fluted number 3 is going to be about the same, but if you do like a number 2, it'll be lighter than a carbon.
Sure.
It would. But
what are you giving up, though?
stiffness. See, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, you give up stiffness. Now on a sheep hunt, maybe you're not shooting ridiculously ranges and you're shooting 1 or 2 shots. And
hopefully.
Yeah, no kidding. And maybe weight's not weight is the most important factor. But most of my builds are for people who long range hunting or just playing around guns where like 400 is where you start.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want light, your number 2 sporter's as light as you can get. Your Kimber, you can't get any lighter than that. Yep. And if you put a carbon, it would add weight.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So, out of curiosity, what cartridge is he going with, or has he decided yet?
6.5 PRC.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Bad mark.
Hey, you know him. I don't have it yet.
You can have 1 PRC.
It's going to be the
7.
Well, for now.
7. You can have 1.
For now.
Intelligent cartridge.
6.5 BC.
But then you might as well not get a 300 short.
I already have 2.
That's kind of my baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Practical man, by the way. You know what else? Builds.
You have a new best friend. It's not just Ryan anymore.
Builds Formula 1 car rifles. Favors wood stocks, Mauser actions like pre-64 Model 70s. Owns a 240 Weatherby. I mean, come on. That's where it's at.
I like weird stuff that works.
Yeah.
Really well.
And, and classic firearms.
I can get down with that. It makes me so happy when I find out there's more out there. Yeah. There's more. There's more of us. There's 3 of us now.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I can't get down with the carbon thing. I like classic stuff too. I like steel.
You can't?
I don't. Whenever I see somebody come up with a carbon wrap barrel, I'm always like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like somebody driving up in a Tesla and the Tesla drove them to me. And they were like, check it out, it goes 0 to 60, and I don't care. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't make any noise.
One of my best customers, this is funny. A good customer, lives in Texas. He's like, hey, I got a project for you. I'm like, what do you got? He goes, I got a Winchester Pre-64. I'm like, oh, love it. I have 2.
Beauty.
And he goes, I want you to put a carbon barrel in. I go, no. No lie. I go, I am not putting a carbon barrel on that gun. Well, why? No. It just ruins it.
Because it's wrong.
That is not a good.
Like it does nothing for me.
It's undeniable that they are a performance enhancing component, right?
Yeah.
But it shouldn't necessarily be the do all end all. I mean, there's still I see a lot of people get hung up on a steel barrel as it's somehow inadequate.
Yeah.
Or it's somehow going to leave you in the dust for something like that.
It's because people nowadays, it's like they don't actually experience anything anymore in person. They just experience things via what a spec sheet tells them.
Sure.
Exactly. Or
that's like what I was,
a magazine ad. They see it, I need that.
Exactly. Or whatever it was. Because it's like I was getting into like electric cars when people are like, oh, it goes 0 to 60 in this. I'm like, so you're telling me that you're having fun because of what a piece of paper says.
Sure.
Did you actually have fun when you did it? Like, for me, the answer is like absolutely not. And so it's like then you're telling me, well, because of all these reasons on paper, that's why steel is out. It's out of here.
I would take
Jim. We're just not going to need trad cars for that much longer.
Trad cars.
I would
I'm sorry. I know
take
that,
a conventional
I didn't even feel good about
steel
that.
barrel over a cheap carbon all day long. All day long.
Mark's got a new 300 short mag. It is a proverbial one-hole gun. It has currently a steel barrel on it. I'm trying to talk him out of yanking it off and putting carbon.
I'm debating buying another. Like, I was, and I probably still will. I'm going to alter it for the sake of altering it. But it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be an extremely lightweight hunting rifle at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're going to add weight to it.
I am not. Impossible.
It's that rifle. It's a
says.
Tikka T3 Superlight.
Okay.
No, it's not.
And he's going to hang a carbon barrel on there.
Yeah, you're gonna add weight.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Listen to the professional, Mark. You tell me to do this all the time.
So here's my question.
Anywho, Mike, I'm getting flustered now. I feel like I'm being attacked. Is that what this was all
This is
about?
an intervention.
Was this just some roundabout way to? Anyway, I have
You told me you didn't
considered
like
buying an
track cars.
identical rifle because that one really does shoot like a house
It
of
is.
fire.
It's stupid.
I'm like, oh, I'll alter this one. Like, this is like my safety net.
That wasn't the one from whitetail season, though, was it?
It was.
Oh, well.
So
That might have been operator error.
the one-hole gun at 100 yards, one-hole gun. Have you shot at a distance like 400? Does it keep quarter MOA at 400? Was what I'd asked.
So I shot it out to, I want to say 8, and I was basically shooting the water line. My biggest thing, even out to 8, was like just right left wind.
It's exceptional.
It was like pretty cool.
Factory ammo.
Wow.
14 rounds down the pipe.
You got a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, 14 rounds down the pipe prior to like a load test.
It was really interesting watching it settle in too.
Yeah.
So it was kind of pop, 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 and then just pew, 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 pew.
Yeah.
Oh, just don't mess with it, Mark.
Yeah.
Great. Now
I don't do it.
Now I need to buy a third 300 short mag.
I don't
that I
think
can
you
futz with a little bit.
I don't think you end up with a spectacularly different result. I mean, okay, so to Matt's point earlier though, definitely stiffer. You plan eventually maybe on hanging a can off the end of it.
Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I don't like is I think that I think the barrel on those is actually 24 and a little bit.
It is.
Yeah.
And someone told me that's an 11 twist.
Mark's, so we have an 11 twist 300 down in the range,
Yep.
and it'll spin stabilize at 220.
Wow.
Which is wild. So we were shooting the Barnes 220 precision match for years. Probably got 1,200 rounds of that down the pipe, and it's unreal. However, we've had 10 twist guns come through in 300 WSM, 300 Win Mag.
I think mine's a 10.
It could be, but ours
I'd have to go look. Now I have to go look.
Yeah, it's an 11 twist and it just hammers. My 308's an 11. I've shot 178s out of there, no sweat. Yeah.
Because I literally have a gun in the shop right now that has 300 short mag, 11 twist, and it will not stabilize 212s. I think he was having trouble with. Or what's the federal fusion or federal ammo? The impact copper.
Oh yeah, I think it's copper.
They have a copper that's that heavy. Or are we talking about?
It's a 180. It's a 180. Sorry, it's a 180.
Winchester has the copper impact. I think.
Yeah.
What's the federal one?
Are you thinking the terminal ascent?
That's it. Terminal ascent. It won't stabilize them.
Sure.
With an 11.
I don't know. That could be profile. Could be mass distribution.
So we're putting
on the
a new barrel
projectile.
on them for them.
Yeah.
So.
We did try a couple things out of it, and what it did like was those 190s, 190 ABLRs
out of that. But his is likely a 10.
I sure think so.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing.
What was I thinking? Man, I was just thinking. The can. You were talking about suppressors, Mark.
Oh yeah.
Are you worried about how much length the suppressor will add to your overall setup?
One thing I would want to shorten up the barrel to use it with the suppressor.
Because you put weight on a little whippy barrel, it might act a little goofy.
And to the problem I presented Matt some months ago was the Tikka contours are so small. When he cut the barrel, like there's barely a shoulder there to index that suppressor off of, and it's something that I've got a long heavy can on there,
right?
That's changing, right? I'm putting a smaller can on there, but I want to make sure that when I put it on there, I'm checking to make sure it's tight against that shoulder and that it doesn't pop loose because there's very little material there.
Gotcha.
And so your contour would not not in that cartridge, like not with that much ferocity.
Yeah.
Would probably not be.
Yeah.
Mark, you should cut it down to 16.
No.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
One more question on contours and carbon wrapping. Last time I was out there, you had some kind of fun prototypes that you'd spun up, where you had small diameter barrels, like a 4-sporter that was carbon wrapped. They looked.
Oh yeah.
They looked gorgeous, and you had mentioned to me, like, at that point, there's probably a little diminishing return because you're not putting enough carbon material into that system to maybe realize the benefit of it. But it's something that could theoretically be done. You end up with a really neat looking product.
Yeah, they were sexy.
Yeah.
We did 40 of them for a very big company in Texas.
Sure.
And they called them their sheep rifle.
Sure.
So it was a number 4 sporter.
Yep.
Carbon. Yeah, like the carbon, I don't know if I mean, something's better than nothing, but are you getting any? I'm going to guess probably not.
They ended up famously light. They really were quite trim.
Yeah.
And because like most of them out there are Sendero light, a Sendero, they're a large diameter barrel.
Yes.
And then this had that swept line of a sporter barrel.
And
man, those look good.
Yeah, and run it more of a conventional stock where it'll fit, and they were cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot we see with conventional barrel practices that are conventional only just because, and they could be something different. We're just not seeing that flow over yet. I don't know. I think it'd be pretty cool. Would you do one of those again?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
We still have the program.
That's good.
It's just usually I'm a practical guy, and like if I don't if I don't see like a benefit, I'm like, well, you're not really getting your bang for your buck thing here. But again, a lot of the guys that come to my shop, oh, it looks so cool. That's why I want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
just
a valid reason.
Hard to deny sometimes.
When you look good, you feel good. That's all I'm saying.
We don't always think upstairs.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, I feel like that's an innately human thing.
Yeah.
We're weird.
You got anything else on fluting on that there?
Man, we've exhausted my list and more. This was cool. This was fun. I enjoyed it. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thanks
Matt.
for having me. Hopefully answered what I could.
Yeah. Well, I had myths and misconceptions that are no longer valid. So I'm smarter because of you. Thank you.
There you go.
Yep.
Hey, that's the goal, right? A little bit at a time.
Yep.
Boy, I'm trying. I've got a long ways to go.
Don't we all?
Well, awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Boy, fluting. Everything you need to know, everything you may not have known, questions answered. All sorts of good stuff here. So what are your thoughts? Do you have a fluted barrel? Do you like it?
Do you have a flute?
Do you have a flute? Is it a jazz flute? Let us know in the comments below.
Classical.
And until next time, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye. There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.